Hey, welcome back to Room 237. This is John. Coming at you with another collection discussion video. And this collection would be... I don't know how do I want to word this. Yeah, obviously Batman is my favorite superhero. You know, comics, movies, animated films, whatever. I love the world of Batman, the lore, the mythology. Godfather's my favorite trilogy. I love the lore, the mythology, and the world that created. But as far as like a big sprawling series that's just continuing, you know, as far as being in the same realm as Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that, I would say my favorite series like that would have to be Planet of the Apes. I love Planet of the Apes. And I have the whole collection. I have all 9 movies. So I'm going to go over those. First, I didn't even really get into Planet of the Apes until I think it was Rise, when that came out in 2011. Because I saw the trailer and I thought that looked really cool. And for a while I was like, well, I like that movie because I really wanted to push that I wasn't into sci-fi. You know, I guess I didn't really want to admit that I, you know, was into like the late 60s, early 70s, stuff like this. But then, you know, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes came out. I fell in love with that, and then, you know, it took off from there. So I guess I should start off with, oh, and of course the first movie is based on a novel by French novelist Pierre Boulle. Of course, there's great differences, but the first film is, of course, 1968's Planet of the Apes, starring Charlton Heston. I still think this is a great film. I put this off forever because I always thought they were going to be cheesy and corny. But one of the things that really got me interested, screenplay, Rod Serling, which I know I haven't talked about it much on my channel, but Twilight Zone is one of the greatest shows ever made. It's in my top whatever shows ever. Rod Serling wrote more than half of their episodes. He's a hell of a writer. And this feels like a live-action Twilight Zone episode. It's a regular guy thrown into an extraordinary, sometimes even ironic circumstance. Has to overcome it, and then there's the twist at the end, which is executed greatly. I mean, the twist you could probably figure out, but the way it's played out, like my girlfriend's dad, he knew I liked Planet of the Apes, and he asked if I'd seen this one. I said no. He's like, you got to see that original film. When you see that twist, you are not going to believe it. I knew the twist, but I didn't know it was going to play out the way it did, and I was still shocked. The makeup effects are way better than the clips I saw when I was younger that made me think it was cheesy. Like, I always thought Planet of the Apes was like, you could tell it was rubber and you just see like their mouths go like this and it'd be really cheap, which the apes in the background are like that. But I mean, the makeup effects on like Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter, I'm not sure if all of these are apes. I think Maurice Evans is Dr. Zaius. But, you know, just these astronauts land on this strange planet, and then they come to find out that humans are these primitive, uncivilized slaves, and apes rule. They're civilized, they have clothes, they ride horses, they shoot guns. And then there's like an allegory for a religion and all that stuff, and the ending is just so great to this. I saw this movie and it changed my perception of Planet of the Apes. So a couple years ago, when the third movie of the reboot series was coming out, War for the Planet of the Apes, they released this, Planet of the Apes Legacy Collection, sort of as a promotional thing. It's a 5-disc set of the whole original series, because these cards, it shows the evolution of Ceasar in all the movies, and if you spell it out or put them together, it says evolution becomes revolution. It's kind of cool looking. But you know, this also comes with the original film, which I already had this, but I didn't have the other 4. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Escape from, Conquest of, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. So, Planet, and Beneath the Planet of the Apes was the second film. I don't think Rod Serling had anything to do with that one. I hope he didn't. No, he didn't. But it feels like they were really trying to capture the whole Twilight Zone kind of, I don't know. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, I think, sucks. It's one of 2 Apes movies I think is just terrible. You don't really get to see much of the apes in it. It's more of these humans that live underground. They've advanced in their own way. They speak telepathically. There's a twist. Charlton Heston comes back as Taylor. And, you know, the way it ends, they really wanted to make sure there was no more Apes movies, but yeah, but I would definitely skip Beneath Planet. Well, you kind of can't. But Beneath is pretty fucking terrible. Escape From is a little different. Kim Hunter and Roddy McDowall come back as Cornelius and Zira. You find out that Charlton Heston's ship, they're 2 good apes that are scientists in this film, and they become friends with Charlton Heston's character Taylor. They are not in Beneath, but they are in Escape From. You find out in the beginning of Escape From, they repaired Taylor's ship during the events of Beneath, and have somehow gone into space and time traveled to 1973 Earth. So they land in our time, or when it came out, which was the early 70s. And they pretty much become celebrities for being talking apes, and then the government gets involved, things get messed up. So this is more of apes in the human world. And it's actually pretty good. It's a little bit more of a comedy, but I actually really enjoyed it. The ending's pretty depressing, but I liked it. The 4th film, Conquest, is one of my favorites of the original series. Kim Hunter is no longer in it, but you do have a Roddy McDowall returning, this time as their son, Ceasar. And in Conquest, shortly after Escape, something had happened where like all domesticated animals had gone extinct. People want a pet, so they go for apes, but they can't be trained or civilized or domesticated, so they become slaves. And Cornelius and Zira's son ends up becoming a slave, but because he's their son, he's super advanced. Names himself Ceasar, and he leads a revolt. And all these movies are rated G, except for Conquest, which is only rated PG. And I mean, Conquest is bloody as hell. I remember watching it and thinking, like, holy shit. Like, people, for like an early 70s PG movie, these people are getting pretty fucked up from these apes. Battle for the Planet of the Apes was the last one. By this time, you know, it pretty much apes rule. They have their own civilization. They can talk. It doesn't really say how much time has passed. There's like a little group of humans left that want revenge on the apes, and a battle ensues. Which is kind of funny because, you know, you don't get to see any of the posters in here or anything. But of course, there's like the epic battle, the conclusion, the final chapter. The battle, literally, at the end, there's like 6 jeeps and trucks against like a handful of apes in like this field. Extremely low budget, kind of laughable. But I like the story where, you know, because I'm trying not to give too much away because I don't want to spend too much time on each movie. The events at the end of Escape, in the beginning of Conquest, before Caesar became Caesar, he was raised by a very good human named Armando. So that's why he has this soft spot for humans. And there's a gorilla in battle, which the gorillas are like the soldiers, who hates humans. So there's like this conflict of hate humans, Caesar, you know, just coexist. They live here, we live here. And there's a big conflict between those two within that battle. And then, you know, battle has a very confusing ending because there's the statue of the lawgiver. Well, actually, the lawgiver is an old wise ape that teaches younger apes. But you find out it's kind of confusing because at the end of battle, there's human children and young apes learning from the lawgiver. And they have a big statue of Caesar, and they zoom in, there's a tear. Because Caesar's hope is that one day humans and apes can coexist without needing guns and weapons. I guess that's to show that even 600 years later, his efforts failed. But I do like the full circle of this. I mean, it's like man lands on Earth thousands of years into the future. You know, then where apes rule, humans don't. Beneath, they blow up the planet. Charlton Heston does, because they're the weird-ass human. Fuck Beneath Planet of the Apes. Escape from, 2 of the apes travel back in time, so that's how everything restarts. But now, humans don't really destroy themselves, as implied by Planet of the Apes. The apes revolt and destroy the humans. So it's almost like a full circle kind of thing, which is what they were going for. And then, like, throughout the 70s, you had, like, an animated series. I think you had a couple. Either of which I never saw. But then, in 2001, this is the other movie I do not like. I would probably say it's better than Beneath, because it still feels like an Apes movie, just a very shitty one. Tim Burton's reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it, Planet of the Apes. Tim Burton's one of my favorite filmmakers. I love his stuff. But when he does properties, I just... You know, I didn't like his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I didn't like his Alice in Wonderland. I don't like his Planet of the Apes. And I love Planet of the Apes. Pretty much everything that worked for this original film, he kind of tried to do, but it didn't work. The makeup is astounding. Even though these look more like real apes than in the original film, I'm still a little partial to the makeup in this. I don't know why. Plus, I just think Roddy McDowall is just a more compelling actor in ape makeup than any apes in this. Tim Roth is pretty much the lead villain as this general chimp named Thade. Pretty much Mark Hamill. Jesus. Mark Wahlberg lands on this planet. But in this one, humans can talk. Humans are still human. They're just treated like slaves. And apes live in this very ape world. He did do some things different. Like, they live in Ape City, which... like, if you mix the jungle and how humans live... But they don't know how to use guns. They don't understand human technology or weaponry, unlike in this movie. That's kind of interesting. But the costumes are a bit silly. It's kind of silly how a lot of times you have the apes, like, because Helena Bonham Carter has to be in it, which this was her first movie with Tim Burton. It shows her drawing with her feet, or how it shows apes hanging upside down while doing stuff. It's kind of silly shit. And of course the ending doesn't make sense. Even Tim Burton says it's not supposed to. There's an insert in here that explains it. But I don't know. I saw this when it first came out when I was like 9 or 10, and I just couldn't get into it. I only bought it now because it was like $3, and I bought it for collection purposes. So yeah, Beneath. I would say Beneath is the worst. I'll give this movie. I can give this movie some credits. The makeup and some of the ideas they did. Beneath is just bad all around, but Tim Burton's is still pretty bad. I'm glad they didn't get to do any sequels to this. Because then in 2011 they did a whole new reboot with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And of course this one is like super realistic, almost like if Christopher Nolan were to do it. Where James Franco, he's working for this place that wants to create this drug that can cure Alzheimer's. This one test chimp gives birth, and the drug has been passed down. That's why he has green eyes. And he names him Ceasar. And his dad is played by James Franco's dad is played by John Lithgow, who has Alzheimer's. And I love John Lithgow. So as Ceasar gets older, he becomes more and more smart. Things happen. He ends up at this ape sanctuary in San Francisco, where it's pretty much, like a madhouse, because he's a smart ape and they're all, lack of a better term, savage apes. He makes them all smart, and of course every human in this is a piece of shit. It's one of those humans are bad movies. Like, other than James Franco, and John Lithgow, you're supposed to hate every human. I mean, their neighbor is a dickhead. Malfoy from Harry Potter, he plays a kid that works at the sanctuary who, abuses and picks on the apes. But, even though I was never really into Planet of the Apes when I was younger, I saw the trailer to this. And there's like a part where all the apes are like bursting out of the sanctuary and heading for the city in like hordes. I thought that looked awesome. Them like storming the city. I thought it was really cool. So I like how it's like the very beginning. It's realistic. I do have some problems. Some things just don't make sense. It's sort of like a sweater logic. You pull one thread, it doesn't make any sense. The CGI doesn't hold up as much. Like, the CGI looks kind of laughable now. But I still think it's a good start to what I think is the best part of Planet of the Apes, which is the new reboot. So after that, we had Dawn. It's 10 years later. It's pretty much all apes. There's a small group of humans who... Well, because the drug they use in this, if humans come into contact with it, it gives them this terrible flu that they call simian flu because of the apes. It goes global, pretty much wipes everyone out. So it's kind of like Walking Dead, but with apes. Small little group of humans, they want to restore power to San Francisco, but they have to do stuff where the apes live in order to do that, like a dam. Ceasar, who of course was raised by loving humans, he has that soft spot. Of course, there's this other ape, Koba, who's always been a test ape. He hates humans. So kind of like in battle, you have that conflict of the ape that hates humans, the ape that thinks there's good in humans. And it pretty much leads to one of the biggest betrayals I think, in movie history. It's pretty heartbreaking to watch. I mean, for a movie where you're supposed to be following apes, and the apes don't really talk in this movie, it's mostly sign language, which I thought was a neat idea. You know, this is when Matt Reeves came in, and he really knows how to create an emotional story with motion capture characters. And speaking of motion capture, Andy Serkis as Ceasar, phenomenal. This movie, the CGI and everything is miles better than in this. The story, it's just... Once everything comes to a head, and some of the best like war images I've ever seen, but with apes against humans. This is an intense movie. A lot of it's really slow, but once you get up towards the third act, there's some intense shit in it. Very emotional stuff too. And I'll even say the last one to come out, which is 2017, is my favorite. And that's War for the Planet of the Apes. I waited forever for this to come out in theaters. Went and saw it with my girlfriend and another friend of ours. The CGI is top notch in this. I mean, it literally, like, I don't know if you can, how well you can see that. That's the orangutan named Maurice, the first ape that Ceasar comes into contact with in Rise. I mean, they look like, compared to this, I mean, you can still tell that they're animated characters, but, you know, the animation is just so good. Because of the ending of this film, where, you know, the military's coming because the humans have alerted the military because of what Koba does. You know, he pretty much has to save his apes. Woody Harrelson plays this colonel who absolutely hates the apes. You do get some great stuff in this too, like how all human survivors still they have the virus, but they're immune. It starts to mutate and gets into the next stage where it makes them resort to primal states, so they start acting the way they do in this film. And of course, they did a very good job at, you know, what can make Ceasar carry a gun? What can make Ceasar want to seek revenge on a human and then realize it was the biggest mistake of his life? The apes are in the worst position they've ever been in, and it's up to him to save them. And James Rolfe described it best in his review. It's like if you take Schindler's List, Passion of the Christ, and mix it with Planet of the Apes, you get this. It sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of what it is. It's sort of like this is the movie that makes Ceasar become like a messiah type. Like they wanted to make him seem like Moses. And inspired by movies like The Great Escape and stuff like that. And this has a great conclusion because even though Planet of the Apes, there's endless possibilities, they did look at this as a reboot trilogy. But I guess they want to make more trilogies like Star Wars or something. This had a very satisfying ending. Very sad, but very satisfying. You know, it really did conclude how Apes started and rose, the dawn and the conflict that would come from that, and the finale. And then, you know, like, what's next for the apes? Also, this one, I talk about fan service every few videos. There are some fan service. Some of them isn't always great. Like when Ceasar gets to the sanctuary and all the apes are screaming and making and screeching. Malfoy yells, "It's a madhouse!" All references to this movie. Or how when Ceasar grabs onto Malfoy and he says, uh, uh, take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. It sounds stupid when he says it. It sounds a lot better when Charlton Heston says it. There's a part where Ceasar is playing with he's building a model of the Statue of Liberty. Let me try that again. Model of Statue of Liberty. Reference to this. The name of the Alzheimer's drug, I think it's called ALZ-112, and another one is ALZ-113, which I think is like the ship number or whatever in this movie. There's a lot more than I'm forgetting, but they really did throw in a ton of references. I think the novel, either the novel or this movie, says that the first ape to speak up against a human was named Ceasar, and that word was no. We see that in this. Ton of references. Also, but the references are throughout. Like the little mute girl in this, her name is Nova, which is Charlton Heston's mate in this, or the mate they hook him up with. So yeah, I really enjoy. I love the original for Charlton Heston. Beneath, thought sucked. Escape, I enjoyed. Conquest and Battle, even though they were really cheap, I liked the stories, and I found them very enjoyable. Don't enjoy this at all. I thought this was a great start to a reboot series. Magnificent sequel. Fantastic ending. I would say this is even a better final chapter in a trilogy than Godfather 3. It's true. I like this more than Godfather 3. I know that they've been planning a fourth film and hopefully spawn on a new trilogy. They said they eventually want to get up into timeline as close to this film. Like, as close to getting with Taylor's ship landing on the planet without actually making that movie. So, where can you go? Of course, he has his other son, Cornelius. At the end of this movie, again, spoilers, I'm just going to say spoilers, Ceasar dies. As he's dying, Maurice is telling him, your son will know who his father is and what his father did for us. Meaning, he's not dying in vain. So, if Maurice is going to grow up, Maurice and Rocket, I want to see them in the next movie. Because you need them. You need Maurice and Rocket. I don't want to jump that too far into the future. Have Maurice be like General Thade's dad in this. Also played by Charlton Heston. Where he's very old and very wise. Cornelius has to lead the apes. But through all of Maurice's teachings about Ceasar, obviously, if he's going to tell Cornelius everything about Ceasar, he has to tell him about Koba and what Koba did. And then, maybe that can make Cornelius conflicted. My father ultimately believed that there was good in humans. So should we apes exist here? Humans exist out in the wild. Or could he be a little angry? Still angry at humans and want to start the whole slavery thing? Also, in each subsequent movie, there's more, like in this one, the female apes wear like those flowery things, sort of like jewelry. They wear that war paint. And then in this one, it shows them taking bark and twine to cover wounds. So maybe they will adapt dress. And, just start advancing more and more. Maybe there will be more rogue apes, like how in the 80s there was like the neo-Nazi punks. Maybe there will be some rogue apes who have heard of Koba and maybe they want to, destroy humans. Anyway, I'm not sure what you would call it. I think at this point, you don't need a movie with a human threat. I think you could have like a civil war for the Planet of the Apes, but that would sound too similar to this. Where it's like, okay, there's this great divide, like divide of the Planet of the Apes. Where it's, do we let the humans coexist on their own or coexist together, or do we have brutal slavery and have that whole thing begin? Maybe begin the transition where the apes are bad and the humans are the victims. That would be very hard. If they pulled it off, I would be very impressed. But that's what the bulk of these movies were. And that's why I liked these ones. Because you really got emotionally involved with these apes. Ceasar, Maurice, Rocket, Koba to an extent. His oldest son, Blue Eyes. Yeah, Blue Eyes. You know, you really got emotionally invested in these characters. That's why this one, I truly think this one is epic. I also think this one is epic. I still think this one's a great start. I have my own thoughts of where I think the next trilogy, or at least the next part, the first part of the next trilogy could go. But, it doesn't seem like anything's going to happen anytime soon, which is a bummer, because I love these movies. I never thought I would be a huge Planet of the Apes fan, but turns out I am. So, yeah, there you have it. All 9 movies, only 2 of them suck, in my opinion. That's not bad. And it's not very often that you get a whole reboot trilogy where each one is better than the last one, even over the original series. Even the original series only has that one dud. And of course, Tim Burton's still sucks. So that's it on Planet of the Apes. Again, big fan. I still may like Batman and Godfather more, but as far as a series with the big scope, like Star Wars or Star Trek, like, this is my Star Wars. Well, so is Batman. Whatever. Anyway, that's all I got. So, for Room 237, John's out. Thank you.